That familiar pit in my stomach hit hard the moment I logged into my bank account. The screen glowed back at me, a stark, undeniable zero. Not even a few dollars, just a flat, mocking zero. It was like looking into an empty fridge after a long day, but instead of food, it was my entire financial life, completely bare. The dread wasn't a sudden wave. It was a slow, creeping chill that had been building for weeks, maybe months. Every bill that landed in the mailbox felt heavier than the last, each one a stark reminder of how far behind I was. The weight of it all, the sheer anxiety of not knowing how I'd cover the next grocery run, let alone rent, was becoming a constant companion. It was suffocating. Just last Tuesday, my old beat-up car decided to give up the ghost right in the middle of rush hour. Smoke billowed from under the hood, and I sat there, utterly defeated, watching traffic crawl around me. The tow truck driver gave me that sympathetic look when he told me the repair estimate. It might as well have been $1 million. There was no emergency fund, no hidden stash, nothing. Just the silence of my empty wallet echoing the silence in my bank account. I remember thinking, this is it. This is really it. It wasn't a dramatic outburst. There were no tears or shouting, just a cold, hard realization settling in. It was a numbness, almost. A quiet acceptance that the way things were, the way I'd been stumbling through life, simply couldn't continue. Something had to fundamentally change, and it had to change right now. The universe, it seems, has a way of forcing your hand when you refuse to play by the rules. I'd been ignoring the signs, making excuses, living in a constant state of avoidance. But that moment, stranded on the side of the road with a dead car and an even deader bank balance, it was a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. It was the lowest point, the kind of rock bottom that makes you see things with absolute clarity. And in that clarity, a strange resolve began to form. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I knew I had to find a different path, a way to manage money even when there was seemingly none to manage, without letting it crush my spirit completely. It felt impossible, yet the alternative was worse. This isn't about some magic trick to get rich quick. It's about a radical shift in perspective, a journey to find peace and control when your finances feel like a runaway train. It's about defying conventional wisdom and finding a path forward that doesn't involve constant misery or self-deprivation. It's about learning to thrive, not just survive, even when you're starting from absolute zero. How do you manage money when you're broke without feeling miserable? That's what we're going to dive into. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. My journey to that empty bank account wasn't a sudden drop. It was more like a slow, steady leak, a gradual erosion of my financial stability that I barely noticed until the floorboards gave way. Looking back, it's clear now, but at the time, each small decision felt harmless, even necessary. My days had a rhythm to them, a routine that, when viewed through the lens of my current situation, was a masterclass in how money just slips through your fingers. Every morning started with a stop at the coffee shop. Not just any coffee, but a fancy latte, a small luxury I told myself I deserved. It was only $5, right? $5 a day, 5 days a week. That's $25. $100 a month, $1,200 a year. That's a car repair, a small emergency fund. But it felt like such a small thing, a simple treat to get the day going. Then there were the lunches out. Packing a lunch felt like too much effort, so a quick takeout meal became the norm. Another $10 or $12 gone, 5 times a week. Suddenly the numbers start to add up, and the money I thought I had for bills was already spoken for, just through small daily choices. Impulse buys were another silent killer. A new gadget I saw online, a sale on clothes I didn't really need, a book that looked interesting but would probably sit unread on my shelf. Each purchase came with a fleeting hit of satisfaction, quickly followed by a dull ache of guilt. I'd justify it by saying I'd work harder, or I'd cut back somewhere else, promises I rarely kept. And the subscriptions. Oh, the subscriptions. Streaming services I barely watched, apps I used once and forgot about, monthly boxes that piled up in my hallway. They were small charges, easy to ignore on a bank statement, but together they formed a steady drain. It was like living paycheck to paycheck, but without any real plan, just a hope that the next deposit would cover whatever holes the last one left. I realize now I had a casual disrespect for my money, a kind of benign neglect. Bank statements would arrive, and I'd skim them, never really looking at the details. Budgeting discussions? Those were for other people, for organized people, not for someone like me who just wanted to enjoy life. I consistently overspent on non-essentials: a new pair of shoes, a night out with friends, tickets to an event. These things felt important at the time, like I was living life to the fullest. Meanwhile, essentials like saving for emergencies or even just having a buffer for bills lagged far behind. I was always playing catch-up, always feeling like I was one step behind, but I never stopped to ask why. There were also subtle emotional cracks that slowly corroded my financial health. That mindset of "I deserve this" became a dangerous mantra. After a tough week, I'd treat myself to something expensive, telling myself I'd earned it. And maybe I had, but earning it didn't mean I could afford it. I developed a fear of looking at my bank balance. It was easier to just not know, to live in a kind of blissful ignorance until the inevitable overdraft fee appeared. Financial planning felt overwhelming, a chore I could always put off until tomorrow. It was a vicious cycle. Avoid looking at the numbers, make impulsive decisions, feel the anxiety, and then avoid looking at the numbers even more. These were the subtle psychological barriers that kept me from managing my money effectively, even when deep down I knew I was heading for trouble. It wasn't about being bad with money, it was about being afraid of it, and that fear kept me trapped. The turning point wasn't a single dramatic event, no sudden flash of insight or a winning lottery ticket. It was a slow dawning, a quiet realization that true wealth wasn't about the numbers in my bank account, but about something far more fundamental: control and understanding. It came after that car breakdown, after sitting there on the side of the road, watching my life unravel in slow motion. The financial anxiety that had been a constant hum in the background suddenly roared to life, demanding my full attention. I remember getting home that night, not angry or sad, but utterly exhausted by the endless cycle of worry. I picked up an old book my aunt had given me years ago, something about mindful living, and tucked inside was a small, dusty pamphlet on basic budgeting. I'd never even opened it. That night, I did. It wasn't a magic solution, just simple steps. But for the first time, I felt a spark of something other than dread. It was the decision to stop letting money manage me and to start managing my money, no matter how little there was. I decided no more to the cycle of avoidance and fear. That was the moment everything shifted. I didn't suddenly become rich, but the feeling of being utterly lost started to fade. The old way of managing money, or rather, not managing it, crumbled under the weight of these new practical strategies. First, I created a bare-bones budget. I mean bare bones. Every single dollar was accounted for. No more vague estimates, no more hoping for the best. I listed every expense, from rent to groceries, and then, brutally, I cut. The daily latte was the first to go. I started making coffee at home. Lunches out became packed sandwiches. Those impulse purchases? They stopped completely. If I couldn't pay for it with cash I had right then, it didn't happen. It felt restrictive at first, almost like deprivation, but the peace that came from knowing exactly where my money was going quickly outweighed the urge for instant gratification. Then came the creative ways to cut expenses. I canceled all those forgotten subscriptions. I called my internet provider and negotiated a lower rate. I started walking or biking instead of driving short distances, saving on gas. I even learned to cook simple, cheap meals that tasted surprisingly good. It wasn't about suffering. It was about being smart. Every small saving was a victory against financial anxiety, a tiny chip away at its power. Identifying hidden income streams was another game changer. I looked around my apartment for things I no longer needed and sold them online. Old books, clothes, electronics. Suddenly, they weren't clutter. They were potential income. I picked up a few extra hours doing freelance work I could fit around my main job. It wasn't a lot, but every extra dollar went straight into a small emergency fund, a small shield against future breakdowns. The biggest shift, though, was in my mindset. I moved from scarcity to resourcefulness. Instead of thinking, I can't afford that, I started thinking, how can I achieve the same outcome differently? Or, do I truly need this right now? It wasn't about accumulating more, but about appreciating what I already had and making the most of it. There were small, consistent wins that built momentum. Paying a bill on time, seeing that emergency fund slowly grow, not having to dread opening my bank statement. These weren't grand victories, but they were deeply satisfying. I wasn't a millionaire overnight, but I achieved something far more valuable: financial stability and peace of mind. The outcome wasn't about becoming rich. It was about gaining control over my life, reducing the suffocating stress of constant worry, and finding contentment with what I had. It taught me that managing money when you're broke isn't about deprivation, it's about intentionality. It's about finding joy in non-monetary aspects of life, in the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're capable of handling whatever comes your way. It's about building towards future goals, one small, deliberate step at a time. True wealth isn't in what you have, but in the peace you find in managing what you've got.